Hello everyone, welcome back. We are here for the third match of the second set of semi-finals in the Victory Road World Cup of Pokémon VGC, sponsored by Elgato. My name is Ben Kiriakou, joined here by Maeve O'Rourke. Maeve, how are you getting on?
I'm doing great. Definitely interesting for me how by about this time yesterday, we were already done with 3 going into 4 matches, and today we've only gone through 2. So interesting to see how hyper offensive the teams were yesterday versus a little bit more slow play from both the Chinese and the Spanish players. Combine Kyogre was a team that came up yesterday, but we saw it run in a far more offensive stance than we did in that last match.
Yeah, definitely, sat there doing a little bit of work, but just wasn't able in the last match that we saw today to really put on the pressure it needed to. And of course, Trick Room pivoting and getting yourself into a great position to utilize all of the turns of the Trick Room is so important when you're using that strategy. But of course, we are going to be going straight into the third match. The scores are tied up 1-1 at the moment. You can see on the screen here with Guillermo taking the first win for Spain, and of course the match that we've just featured here, Shengfu taking the second victory for China. So now coming up, we have Yuxiang versus Max for these two teams, and we'll see who is going to be going into the lead now.
Yeah, exactly like you said earlier, almost with that matchup, right, is putting on enough pressure. And for both of these teams, they need to make sure that they're putting on the pressure against each other. Yuxiang is going to be trying to do that with a Zacian, Incineroar, Rillaboom, Landorus Incarnate, Urshifu Rapid Strike, but a Gothitelle as well. And we saw that Gothitelle in a matchup last week, which was really interesting, paired with a Zacian, because they were able to kind of prevent Incineroars from switching in, getting multiple Intimidates off onto that Zacian and allow it to kind of get that work and that setup that it really likes to have and keep that Intrepid Sword boost. So I'm interested to see exactly how you probably work and pivot around with this, but could be tough, especially seeing some of the opponents on the opposite side of the field.
Yeah, and Yuxiang having a runner-up in the Jolly Broom number 44, one of their local online events this year, and of course, two-time champion in the Shanghai monthly event. Well, there's a lot of great players in China, so definitely not something that you can ignore. We've just had the scores come in from both of these players. They're two top players from their teams. Yuxiang with a 7-1 record, and Max, coming up on your screen now, is 6-0 in games. So both of these players have such an achievement in this tournament itself, and we get to see them facing up against each other.
Yeah, Max, a powerhouse of a player in this World Cup, will be bringing a Kyogre like we saw last game, but gonna be a bit different. It's gonna be the Kyogre with Incineroar, Serena, Regieleki, Tornadus, and Shedinja. And Shedinja's a Pokemon that I see and I immediately get a little bit of trauma flashbacks to some of my locals where we always had to counter team for Shedinja back in 2019. But interesting to see, I believe this is our third Kyogre team of the day, and we saw the Combined variant, but now we're seeing once again that Tornogre variant, that Tornadus Kyogre, with the Serena and the Regieleki, which, a really powerful team that we've been able to see run that hyper offensive moveset and, have a lot of great opportunities to protect that Kyogre, but you're not going to be able to do that so much if your only switching options are a Volt Switch or a U-turn or Parting Shot.
Yeah, certainly. And, you mentioned that Shedinja being the thing that sticks out in the matchup, and I think that's definitely going to be the more sort of pivotal part of the team. We actually had a little mistake there by the looks of things in the team preview with Max actually holding a Weavile rather than the Incineroar. So apologies on that, but we are seeing team preview right now with the teams on the screen. We are going to be seeing it from Yuxiang's perspective, and he's going to be having, I think, a little bit more of a tough time actually, because looking at the team compositions with the only Pokemon potentially being able to knock out the Shedinja on Max's side of the field being that Incineroar, there's half a chance that the Rillaboom has something like a knockoff. Maybe the Urshifu, seeing as it's carrying a Choice Scarf, could be holding Rock Slide, but they're kind of outside choices for the team. So Max could be in a little bit of a good position just by virtue of having that Shedinja. That's going to really I think, change the flow of the match and be how these players adjust for what they've got to face and force Yuxiang to pick up certain Pokemon just to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, Shedinja and Weavile are the leads here as well, while Zacian and Urshifu are coming out. That Zacian, like you said too, probably loving the fact that there actually isn't a Incineroar, where if you look at Max's graphic, it shows an Incineroar. It is that Weavile that is currently on the screen. Weavile Pokemon we saw on Santino's team for that invitational, for the World Championship invitational. So we can see that it is really useful with a really fast fake out. Can be nice to kind of put a stop to some of these Pokemon from setting up. But Shedinja right now looks pretty, looks like it can be a pretty big pain, especially if it goes for something like an ally switch or even something like a poltergeist, if it is carrying that move, just to try and get some damage off.
Certainly is, and we do see a little bit of a sneak peek that Rock Slide is on the Urshifu on Yuxiang's side of the field, so definitely going to be pretty crucial coming into this game. We see a switch out from the Weavile going into that Sarina, and Zacian switching straight out into Incineroar, so a little bit of a defensive play on both sides here with Intimidate coming off from that Incineroar.
Yeah, no fake out either, because that Weavile switched out. A Shadow Sneak, though, from the Shedinja into the Incineroar. Not very effective. And it is able... Actually, is that a Rocky Helmet there on that Incineroar? Yeah. It has to be, right? Rocky Helmet on that Incineroar, able to take out that Shedinja, which is absolutely incredible, while the Surging Strikes will go into that Serena slot, who will take this pretty comfortably, but you're losing your Shedinja for a really nice item reveal right out of the gate by making sure that that Incineroar was able to switch in. You'll have fake out pressure, or you won't because of that Queenly Majesty on the field. But mostly you'll have that fire type pressure with something like that Flare Blitz maybe on that next turn to help deal with the Serena as well. Kyogre switches in here for that Fallen Shedinja slot. So now you've got Kyogre, Weavile, Shedinja who's out of the game, and Serena. So you can maybe assume that you have something like that Regieleki or that Tornadus in the back.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here eating my words with the item choice here on this Incineroar. Either you switch it into a Will-O-Wisp or something like that if you're scared of it on the Zacian, or in fact the Shadow Sneak goes off, and hey, it's really just a profit at this stage. The Urshifu, though, not in the best of positions. Really now facing down that Sarina, and the Kyogre locked into the Surging Strikes, not going to be able to do too much as Water Spark comes out and does get just a straight knockout on this Incineroar, does a lot of damage to this Urshifu.
Yeah, Urshifu, like you said, locked into these Surging Strikes here. Will do 3 damages of critical hits, but not a whole lot of damage onto 2 Pokemon that don't take it, even at neutral here. Losing that Incineroar as well shows how important it is, like how bulky or how strong that this Kyogre is at full health. Serena goes for a Grassy Glide. Without that terrain, doesn't even matter if it's not going first. Able to get that damage off and knock out this Urshifu. So even losing that Shedinja was nice for Max to be able to switch in this Kyogre and get this big damage off onto some Pokemon that it really doesn't love facing down, but you still have to deal with that Zacian who can come in, and with this and with this Rillaboom as well. So Rillaboom will set the grassy terrain, won't help because it won't be able to Grassy Glide into this Kyogre, so you have to hope it's carrying something like a Wood Hammer or a Drum Beating to be able to do damage with that Serena on the opposite side of the field. Zacian gets its Intrepid Sword boost up here, so it will at least be able to get some nice damage off as well.
Yeah, and I think, with the Shedinja off the field, these are the 2 Pokemon that you'd probably want against the rest of the team. It depends on what Max's last Pokemon is, and Yuxiang needs to be aware of that. We did see the Kyogre go before Yuxiang's Urshifu, which we know is Choice Scarf, and that does confirm that the Choice Scarf is being carried by that Kyogre, and it's being trained to be faster than the Urshifu on Yuxiang's side of the field as well. So switching, very good play here from Max, just trying to reposition, but he's gonna have to take some big damage for his troubles.
Yeah, nobody here wants to take a Behemoth Blade. It will be the Serena as the target. It is enough to knock it out thanks to that +1 from that Intrepid Sword and a critical hit to boot. So a really great critical hit there to be able to knock out this Pokemon that is stopping you from using Grassy Glide. Going though for a knockoff into this Weavile will do a great amount of damage and knock off whatever item that Weavile is holding. Could possibly be something like that Wide Lens if it is carrying Triple Axle and wants to be able to hit all of those moves with only a 1% miss chance, or it could be that Focus Sash. My Chinese is not very good, personally.
No, indeed. Yeah, so we'll have to see what the maybe in subsequent games what the Weavile is going for. Now the Kyogre coming in will be able to be locked into whatever move that Max decides to, and actually not a horrible position given that there's some fake out pressure on the field. That's what the Weavile's going for this turn into the Rillaboom, and what's probably going to be something like, oh no, an Origin Pulse in fact. Coming out from that Kyogre, going to be doing a little bit of damage to both Pokemon on Yuxiang's side of the field.
Yeah, I like the Origin Pulse choice here now, especially because that Kyogre's at half health. If it takes a Grassy Glide, it's going to be lower, and knowing that it's locked into that move as well at least shows, you know that you can't go for Water Spout. You have to, hope with that accuracy there of that Origin Pulse. If you're carrying something like Thunder as your third move with that rain, it's not going to be super helpful just in dealing with something like a Rillaboom, who is going to be able to put on so much pressure. And having Weavile as your last Pokemon means you're probably going to have to go for something like a Triple Axle, maybe to just get some pressure, get that knockout onto the Rillaboom, and hope that you connect all 3 times to make sure that you're able to get that knockout. Depending on how this Incineroar is trained, it may only need 2 hits, but sometimes that's just kind of the name of the game in terms of just hoping for some hits. If you're working with not fully accurate moves like Origin Pulse and like Triple Axle, then you can be in a tough spot. Grassy Glide, though, gonna go first, is gonna be able to knock this Kyogre out. It is Weavile against both of these 2 Pokemon, and Weavile's not gonna love taking any sort of Steel type move here. Triple Axle, though, into the Rillaboom, gonna be a great piece of knowledge to see. It's going to take at least 3 hits from a little over half health to knock that Rillaboom out. So Zacian will be able to really do almost any sort of damage here and probably take care of this Weavile, especially this Behemoth Blade. That's super effective damage. This will wrap the game up for Yuxiang against Max, and I think Max is going to have to be a little bit better prepared now. I don't think Shedinja comes to that next game.
No, I think Shedinja, we found out what Yuxiang has to deal with Shedinja, whether or not it's the Rocky Helmet or the 2 Pokemon that have probably super effective moves. I don't think we ever saw the moves on the Incineroar. Certainly if we did, I certainly missed it. But Shedinja is going to be quite problematic for Max to bring, even though it looks like it's going to be a great Pokemon to come to that matchup. You just can't be 1 Pokemon down turn 1, and especially being that Pokemon that you want to be that end game scenario. Because of course, if the Weavile went down that turn instead of the Shedinja, then and the Shedinja was in that end game, it would have been a clear win or almost certain a win for Max there, depending on the moves on the Rillaboom. But going into team preview now, I think it's going to have to be maybe that Tornadus making a little bit of an appearance here in favour of the. But either Tornadus or Regieleki, I think, in favour of the Shedinja. Just try to be a little bit more conventional, do a little bit more damage, and put some different types of pressure on the field. And I think the question mark is to whether or not that Gothitelle is going to be coming to this game, and whether or not Yuxiang's going to be able to just control the momentum, stop that Serena switching in, and maybe have Pokemon that they want onto the field and just keep on attacking until without Max being able to switch his Pokemon out and reposition.
Yeah, like you said, that Gothitelle will be coming this game, but that means the Incineroar gets left behind, so this could actually be a kind of a sneaky good spot for that Shedinja if it did come. But again, adjustments are important here. Regieleki, I believe, will be that switch for that Shedinja, as the Kyogre is paired with it right out of the gate. Urshifu and Gothitelle mean that the only switching possibility you could have is a Volt Switch from this Regieleki here, as this Gothitelle is going to trap these Pokemon in, get some fake out pressure on that next turn, and Kyogre is going to have to look into maybe trying to deal with a Pokemon that doesn't like facing down a Regieleki either.
No, and with Gothitelle having the access to fake out this turn, it's really Yuxiang's choice as to what Pokemon he wants to stop doing too much damage this turn. I think it's quite clear that you want to protect that Urshifu and save it for the later game. That's exactly what Yuxiang does here, switching it out into Rillaboom and going to be sending that grassy terrain onto the field.
Yeah, grassy terrain on the field, making sure you're not going to take something like a Volt Switch from this Regieleki or any other type of move here, but Regieleki won't be able to go for something because it gets a critical hit fake out, which does actually a little bit nice damage to that Regieleki. Kyogre, though, goes for that Water Spout. That's the move of choice for it now. Will bring that Gothitelle down to just 2 HP, so a little bit of a Ghost Focus Sash there on top of the Focus Sash it's already carrying, but not revealing the Focus Sash by being at 2 HP, which is a little bit of an interesting piece of knowledge to have as well, because now you're not sure, right? You don't activate that Focus Sash and it almost looks like 1 HP from Max's perspective.
Yeah, and now you're in a position with Yuxiang where he's got that Gothitelle still on the field, and now he can just helping hand Grassy Glide in Kyogre and knock it out. No chance of Sarina coming in, no chance of repositioning, and that's easily going to be able to be enough to knock out that Kyogre in one.
Oh, absolutely. Kyogre not loving any sort of helping hand grass moves. There will be a Thunder here from this Regieleki onto the Rillaboom. Does a pretty good chunk of damage for a Pokemon that does not take it even at neutral, but Regieleki's got a long road here, especially if it's got to try and break through this Gothitelle. It could go maybe for something like an Electro Web if it isn't locked into that Thunder, because it isn't Choice Scarf, because we believe that Kyogre is carrying it just due to the speeds here, but it could be tough still as well, especially for Max, who now has to bring in that Serena, and Serena could probably, you know, not love to deal with really any moves here, even if it is stopping something like that Grassy Glide.
Yeah, indeed. I think it's going to come down to what the moveset on the Gothitelle is. If, as you say, the Electro Web does come out, it could be enough to knock out the Gothitelle here, but, you know, another helping hand and attack from the Rillaboom. Won't be that Grassy Glide, of course, because Serena's on the field, but could be knockoff or another grass move of choice. Could even be a U-turn onto the Serena. Rillaboom usually outpacing Serena, being able to go first and lock out super effective attacks. And now that one Pokemon has been knocked out on Max's side of the field, Gothitelle's kind of done its job. Switching is suppressed by virtue of having less options on Max's side of the field, so could go down without too much worry here. I don't think Yuxiang would worry too much about that at all.
Yeah, a Grassy Glide from the Serena onto the Rillaboom does a pretty good chunk of damage, while there will also be here a Thunder onto that Rillaboom. So Rillaboom wouldn't have been able to go for that U-turn this turn, but it was actually planning on that for the Serena. But most importantly, there was a Thunder Wave miss from this Gothitelle onto the Serena, I believe. So the Serena was not able to get paralyzed like you may have wanted from your Gothitelle.
No, now we're in a position where with the Regieleki being locked into, by the looks of things, locked into Thunder, based on the damage it did to an Assault Vest Rillaboom, probably reasonable to think that it's a Choice Specs variant. Yuxiang will know, how his Pokemon have been trained and know what the damage that he would expect from each particular item on the Regieleki would be. But if that's the case, Regieleki's locked into Thunder, and it's locked in with a Zacian, so the Thunder will definitely hit. Grassy Glide will of course go first from the Sarina, but Regieleki likely to go down here to a Play Rough if it connects.
Yeah, it is going to be taking that Thunder onto that Zacian, though, so I agree. Most likely with that damage, it's got to be that Choice Specs, right? Zacian, Play Rough into the Regieleki is enough for that one-hit knockout. Of course, revealing no Focus Sash, just to be certain. Now you know that it is that Specs damage, so pretty important piece of information to at least have going forward, knowing you can take that out with a one-hit knockout. You do have to send your Urshifu back in here with the Serena with the Grassy Glide capabilities, so it can still not be the greatest position for you, especially after taking so much damage. Even if the Serena also knows something like Triple Axle, which may not be super effective, and you have your Shedinja in the back actually, so now you have to lock yourself into Rock Slide, I think.
Yeah, Rock Slide's the only move that really makes sense here. Depends on what item that Shedinja has. If it's carrying a Focus Sash, then the likelihood is a Shadow Sneak, or even if it's not carrying a Focus Sash, actually thinking about it, a combination of Shadow Sneak and Grassy Glide is probably enough to knock out the Urshifu. Maybe not, but it's got a good opportunity to, and certainly if it's got a Focus Sash, then it'll get another opportunity to Shadow Sneak afterwards, and Zacian definitely doesn't have any moves in its arsenal that is able to deal with that Shedinja whatsoever. So yeah, nice play here from Max, just bringing it in the back and just weakening his opponent's Pokemon and team until there's no answer for that Shedinja, and just bringing it in the end game.
It's Urshifu, though, able to survive here. Actually going for a Rock Tomb is that move of choice, not Rock Slide. Will lower the speed of the Serena, but not going onto that assumed ally switch on the Shedinja, who instead went for that Shadow Sneak. Behemoth Blade, though, also onto that Serena slot, so a nice double target. You're at least able to ensure you get one knockout here. The Shedinja can only single target you with something like that Shadow Sneak, so now the Shedinja has to make sure that it targets this Urshifu because this Zacian has no way to really take care of it. So interesting end game plan here because that ally switch didn't actually come to fruition.
No, and I was having a quick look at the numbers there that Yuxiang has left on his Urshifu. It looks like another Shadow Sneak will be enough to knock it out. If that's the case, then yeah, there's nothing that Zacian will be able to do, and eventually the Shedinja will be able to knock out the Zacian. And of course, if there's a focus sash there on the Shedinja as well, it hasn't been activated yet, and so you have the opportunity for maybe 2 Shadow Sneaks, which will definitely be enough to pick up the KO on this Urshifu.
Yeah, this is that point where we said Rock Slide, and Rock Slide would have been much more helpful. One Shadow Sneak is enough to do it. This will at least put this Zacian in an endgame that it physically cannot win because Shedinja is so tough to deal with that Wonder Guard ability. So, like we said earlier, Rock Slide would have at least made that ally switch play not really be much of a problem, right? But instead, that Rock Tomb means you have to focus on a single target, and then you have to deal with the ally switch mind games. So protecting the Shedinja in the back was actually a really nice move here by Max by not sending it out right in the beginning and making sure that if there was that Incineroar brought this game, that you remove that threat before allowing the Shedinja to come in, and you reveal at least that rock type move on that Urshifu as well. So now you at least know what your win con is for the game. So this is a little bit of a tougher spot here. You may have to forfeit just to end the game and maybe get something like a little bit of preventing some knowledge from being hidden, but I mean, you have to forfeit, right? Or you just time out the end of the game. Zacian, though, just going for some protects, possibly looking maybe for some sort of timeout here by the Shedinja, but even with that HP percentage, Shedinja has 1 HP. Its HP percentage is always 100%, so.
It is, and yeah, it's unfortunately not a good way to, or not a way that you can win, unfortunately, in a 1v1 versus Shedinja. I think Yuxiang's just taking a little bit of time. You can see him looking at his Pokemon there in as well as Max's Pokemon. I think he's trying to just figure out what he wants to do for the next game, and yeah, obviously clearly this is going to be going to a game 3, so definitely want to take as much time as you can, and I'm sure Max will be thinking about what he's going to do once he's locked in that Shadow Sneak. Shadow Sneak has so much PP that it is just going to be able to carry on doing it. It's not going to have any risk of running out before this Zacian is knocked out.
Yeah, and this Shedinja can continue to go for these Shadow Sneaks, do this nice chip of damage. It's going to need at least one more to knock out this Zacian here, and the Zacian's still not going to be able to do anything to this Shedinja. So, like you said, I really think that this is kind of a moment to sit here and plan your game 3. You know that your Incineroar was such a key part of taking out this pesky Shedinja, even if Max didn't really realize that Shedinja was unable to, really do anything to that rocky helmet on the Incineroar. But a tough call with that ally switch, possibly. It's tough when you have a single target rock type move when we assumed that it was Rock Slide instead of Rock Tomb, because if it was Rock Slide, I could see that end game going. You don't have to worry about an ally switch. You can just go for that Rock Slide, hope it connects, then you can at least take it out on the next turn after you've been able to take out Serena. But maybe the Rock Slide versus Rock Tomb damage plus a Behemoth Blade into Serena wouldn't have been a knockout anyway. So a little bit of a tougher end game there. I can see why Shedinja causes so many problems and gives me a little bit of anxiety just remembering it.
Yeah, as does it with all other players that have been through formats where Shedinja has become even somewhat popular at all. Yeah, and I think now it comes down to, does that Gothitelle come again? I think really, because you had to drop in Incineroar for something. If you look at the Pokemon on Yuxiang's side of the field, Zacian kind of has to come, really. Has such a good matchup against so many Pokemon. Rillaboom has to come because you're playing into a rain matchup. Urshifu is one of the sources of damage for the rest of the team. Its Choice Scarf is quite useful. Rock Tomb's quite useful for the Zacian. Less so with it being slower than the Kyogre, but it's still really good. And then you've got the last Pokemon here, which is the Incineroar, the Gothitelle. Landorus wouldn't really come to this sort of matchup, and now you've got to decide on, you know, whether or not you can afford for the Urshifu to be dropped, as you can see on the screen there, or if you think that the Urshifu is just too valuable to be able to deal with some of the more pesky Pokemon like Weavile or others. So yeah, I think this is going to be quite interesting. We can see the adjustment here, obviously, from Yuxiang's side of the field. We'll see if that Shedinja comes again, because it's come to 2 games now already, and if I was Max, I'd be thinking, well, if my opponent thinks they're going to be bringing it out again, maybe I won't bring it, and I'll bring something that's a little bit more directly effective against my opponent's team.
Yeah, but instead there is a switch up just in these leads. The Serena and the Regieleki with the Zacian and the Gothitelle. This Gothitelle not going to be able to fake out due to this Queenly Majesty, but it may be able to go for something like that Thunder Wave that we saw miss on those prior turns. So maybe able to be a little bit more helpful, or even just go for something like a Helping Hand with this Zacian and get a really strong attack off on this first turn.
And a Helping Hand would definitely be enough to knock out the Serena. We've got to assume that the Focus Sash is being carried onto the Shedinja on Max's side of the field, so unlikely that the Serena is carrying it. If we see something like a Volt Switch out from Max's side of the field, it's going to do some damage, maybe put some chip on either Zacian or Gothitelle. That would be quite good for the sort of mid-late game, but equally, if you've got to if your opponent's getting a KO on Serena, you're really not feeling that trade.
Yeah, you're really not feeling it from a Volt Switch here from this Regieleki. Does almost half damage to this Zacian, who was boosted by a Helping Hand right out of the gate due to the priority of Helping Hand. This will allow for Max to possibly send in something like this Shedinja. So Shedinja came to this game. Shedinja, though, probably not going to be the target of this Behemoth Blade as the animation goes off. Will go into this Serena with that Helping Hand boost. Is going to do a ton of damage, enough for a full one-hit knockout here. Shedinja, though, looking down a Pokemon that it knows cannot touch it. So you can start going for some Shadow Sneaks again, maybe. You just have to kind of deal with whatever kind of comes around. You can try and bait a switch for your Incineroar in the back that Max doesn't know if you've brought or not, because you sent it in as your forced slot, so it is a bit more hidden on this game. So a little bit of an interesting mind game, I think, for Yuxiang to be able to predict who maybe he wants to switch in or out.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the good thing about Shedinja is it doesn't take any damage. The bad thing about Shedinja is it doesn't do any damage. And so you're in this position where Max is down really quite a key piece in his board, especially if Rillaboom is in the back, as I believe we saw in Team Preview. Kyogre coming onto the field, you know, it's going to put pressure on, and it's going to do a lot of damage, but unfortunately, you know, unless the ally switch is there, which it certainly could be, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever to be seeing it. You know, you've got this position where the Kyogre could be protected maybe from a Grassy Glide coming out from the Rillaboom, but maybe not. And I think, you know, we haven't seen it so far yet coming out, and Max maybe just saving it for the times where it really matters.
Yeah.
But it will come down to targeting on the Rillaboom here onto the Kyogre, and what the Kyogre, you know, decides to lock itself into as the Zacian protects.
Yeah, Zacian protecting will stop anything from this Kyogre doing damage to it, while the Shadow Sneak goes into the Gothitelle. So an interesting piece to see that it does a pretty good chunk of damage for Shedinja. Kyogre going for one of these 2 target moves, most likely that Water Spout, as it has that full HP here, will be enough to knock out this Gothitelle, so may allow for something like a free switch in here. If you bring in your Incineroar, it's not going to be happy facing down a Kyogre as much as happy as, you know, that Rillaboom would be, and this Rillaboom will at least be able to possibly get some damage off onto the Kyogre, but then you have to deal with the ally switch from the Shedinja, right? If you're going for Grassy Glide, it can just ally switch itself to make sure that, you know, you're not taking any damage and this Kyogre is healthy to stay on the field.
Yeah, but you can kind of bait it out in this situation. You know, I really do think the ally switch is something that Yuxiang has to respect, but you've got kind of 2 turns to deal with it. You've got first fake out, which will be in a higher priority bracket than the ally switch, and so will go out onto the Kyogre first. before the Shedinja is able to do any sort of shadow sneaking, ally switching shenanigans. You kind of test the waters there, and then maybe opportunity to do it the next turn. But in the meantime, you've got to potentially take advantage of or stop a play rough going into that Kyogre.
Interestingly enough here, though, the Shedinja instead goes for neither an ally switch nor any sort of thing here. It instead goes for an X Scissor. So X Scissor onto this Rillaboom does a really nice chunk of damage, a pretty powerful bug type move for the Shedinja to be carrying, and is actually putting in work here. Zacian targeted into that Shedinja slot as well, but was not able to connect. So like you said, maybe a bait there for ally switch.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be the key turn coming up here. Grassy Glide would be sensible, but it isn't necessarily the move that Yuxiang will go for, because if it is that ally switch you want to be knocking off. We saw the dark type move in the move preview there for the Rillaboom, so it's only got one turn to do it. As we see the Incineroar switch out for Zacian, so looks like a Grassy Glide wants to be connecting onto that Kyogre, and it does.
And it gets that knockout, so a really nice play, a little bit more patient for Yuxiang, making that call saying he's not going to ally switch this turn. Instead, I'll be taking an X Scissor for my troubles, but will allow me to get my Zacian back into the game here, and then I still have my Incineroar out on the field in a pretty good position. So now this Kyogre's off of the field. You've lost that big threat that could deal so much damage to your Incineroar here. Regieleki will come back on the field and be able to put on some pressure with those Thunders possibly while the rain is still up. But Zacian now back on the field, getting that Intrepid Sword boost, going to be able to do a pretty good chunk of damage to this Regieleki. And now you're on that 2v2 scenario, right, where this is where 50-50s come in. But we've seen the X Scissor and we've seen the Shadow Sneak. We haven't really seen a whole lot from the Shedinja otherwise. So fake out onto the Regieleki is going to allow for that Regieleki to be put in its place. There's the ally switch finally. So that reveals that third move, will allow for these Pokemon to switch positions here, which means that whatever move that the Zacian went for into that Shedinja isn't going to connect, because now that Shedinja is taking its place with that Wonder Guard ability to stop anything that Zacian can throw at it.
Yeah, but one of the things that we can see on this Incineroar is two Dark type moves. You'd assume one of them is Parting Shot, but one of them could be, I think looking at the PP, it looks like it could be Snarl. If that's the case, then this Shedinja could be quite threatened, and of course the Zacian, no stranger to be able to protect itself from any moves that the Regieleki wants to lock itself into. And so, if it is the Snarl, if I've got that right, we could just see the Protect here coming out as we do from the Zacian, and the little bit of damage control coming out from the Incineroar to stop the Regieleki getting up the one-hit knockout here.
Yeah, Thunder will be the move of choice onto this Incineroar. It is enough to bring it down to 1 HP, and that is not a Focus Sash either. And it's going to be the Darkest Lariat as that Dark type move onto the Shedinja. So this Shedinja is going to be taken down to its Focus Sash. This is absolutely insane, because now that this Incineroar, right, it didn't go for something like a Flare Blitz, and it didn't get knocked out by any sort of recoil. That was it has to have been trained that way, right, to take that Thunder. But now the rain's gone, so that Thunder is less accurate.
Yeah, wow, okay. So now we've got to rethink things. So basically now it comes down to one thing. Does the Thunder connect with the Incineroar or not? Because if it does, then the Incineroar gets knocked out, there's no more moves that can target the Shedinja, and Max takes the game. If it doesn't hit, then there's the Darkest Lariat that can come out onto the Shedinja. We've seen this Focus Sash already break. Shedinja's not going to be able to stop the Zacian from picking up a KO here. And then the Zacian probably picks up a KO on the Regieleki if it connects with a Play Rough. And that's game for Yuxiang. So we've really got two routes here. Aside from, of course, the ally switch, which I didn't mention whatsoever coming out here. We'll see who
the Thunder
targeted.
Miss. There was a Thunder Mist there, but the ally switch still means that the Shedinja was not going to take any damage from the Zacian here, but Incineroar will go for the Darkest Lariat and target down the Shedinja slot. So now Shedinja is off of the field. A massive Thunder Mist here by that Regieleki to allow this Incineroar to go for that move to be able to take out the Shedinja and allow for a much more secure win con at the end of this game. Losing that Rain was an absolutely pivotal moment here in this game as well for Yuxiang. Gonna allow him to most likely take care of this, especially if this is that choice specs like we've assumed here, because it's not carrying something like a Focus Sash, and it's locked into Thunder, so it could be stuck only targeting one of these Pokemon at a time, and Regieleki's not the strongest of Pokemon in terms of its defense stats here, so not gonna love taking a move from either of these two, though it is gonna be a Protect from the Zacian, possibly just trying to bait out a little bit here from this Regieleki. Regieleki goes for a Thunder into the Zacian slot as well, so that is not going to be doing any damage. Another Darkest Lariat from this Incineroar will allow it to do a great chunk of damage onto this Regieleki, get it down to under half, so now you know you at least need one more of those while this Regieleki is locked into Thunder. Oh my god, Ben.
Yeah, anyway, this is now game for Yuxiang. Behemoth Blade is going to be able to knock out the Regieleki, and it can't miss, and so is Darkest Lariat from this point. Really good targeting from Yuxiang a couple of turns ago as the Thunder lands into the Incineroar to pick up the knockout there, but Behemoth Blade going to finish the job here and take the victory for China. Yeah, we saw the Behemoth Blade going into the Shedinja slot after an ally switched, as well as the Darkest Lariat. So Yuxiang just saying, I don't care which slot the Shedinja's in, I'm going to either knock out the Regieleki, and if the play rough connects, then the Darkest Lariat diverts onto the Shedinja. If it doesn't, and the Thunder still misses, then I get 2 attacks into the Regieleki and I knock it out. And then if you in any way target my Incineroar with the Shedinja, then you get knocked out by the Rocky Helmet. So it's kind of a win-win situation regardless, and I really like that. Yuxiang, the Thunder miss was obviously the crucial part there. It's a sort of small-medium chance of it happening. A little bit unfortunate for Max, but that's the way that Pokemon goes sometimes.
Well, this is shaping up to be an absolutely incredible semifinals, right? If we are getting down to the wire on our last turns of game 3s between these players, this is going to be an absolutely incredible rest of the day, right? We've already had some really great matches just earlier on. Like you said, that Thunder miss, absolutely crucial, but even more crucial, right, is the way that Incineroar was trained to live on just 1 HP with that Ghost Focus Sash, as we call it here, and not even revealing the actual Focus Sash on the Gothitelle because it got down only to 2 HP instead of 1 just from a hit. So really interesting how these damage rolls kind of worked out throughout this entire game, but nonetheless, like you said, very great targeting and even that more patient play when you're facing down something that is all mind games like Shedinja or like anything that can carry ally switch, something even like a Latias that we've seen a little bit throughout this tournament. But you gotta sit back, right? You can't get too wrapped up in your head because it's like, well, what if he ally switches but then thinks that I think he's gonna it's like that whole absolutely insane mind game that you can really take yourself down your own rabbit hole trying to deal with.
Definitely, it's such a difficult mind game, but that in this game went to Yuxiang. China taking the 2-1 lead to Spain in this matchup in the semi-finals of the Victory Road World Cup sponsored by Elgato. But we are going to be going to a short break now. We'll be coming back very soon with your next match coming up, so stay tuned. Make sure you're here. We'll be back very soon.